I had a little basal cell carcinoma. About a quarter of my scalp removed on last Wednesday.
Wow. Sounds fun.
Pretty easy, it's surprising that they. That's what they took. They're on the scoop, so. It's got a little dent in my head.
I thought maybe the rock and sock and robot things got him.
Or you could do walk back and forth between the book there.
It feels like I got a facelift though, where they pull the skin back together. Feel like I got the surprise look on his face.
Nose.
Yeah. Yeah, we were expecting it. In layers.
I keep going, I thought it's quaint.
Yeah, it was. It wasn't a thin layer.
Oh, it's such a good brain. Would you use okay, it's jammed, just doesn't have the little on my screen.
Okay. We'll go ahead and call to order. The school, Pleasant Hill School District Board meeting for Monday, October 16th, 2023. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you go ahead and read the mission statement for us?
Definitely.
Thank you.
Our mission to graduate all students with high levels of academic and personal achievement, ready for post-secondary excellence, prepared for productive, compassionate citizenship through research-based instruction and a collaborative system of support.
All right, 2.0 changes or additions to the agenda. Right, hearing none. 3.0 introductions and attendance. The audience, please introduce themselves.
Hi, Jessica Holtby, elementary teacher, community member.
Thank you for coming.
Yes.
And then how many did we have attending online last week or last meeting? Excuse me.
7.
Thank you. 4.0 public forum. Individuals who are on site during this portion of the board meeting, members of the public are specifically invited to present items of commendation and or concerns. At the discretion of the board chair, further public participation may be allowed if the specific agenda items are under consideration by the board. This is under district policy BDDH. Individuals who are viewing online. PHSD posts the upcoming agenda on our website, pleasanthill.k12.or.us, the Friday before regularly scheduled Monday school board meetings. This will allow for public comment prior to the board meeting. Please click on the tab provided to share your comments for the school board to consider in the upcoming meeting. Personnel matters may not be discussed in public at a school board meeting. Members of the public who have personnel concerns or commendations should share them directly with the district superintendent. Any?
Well, I guess I'm the only one. I did kind of want to bring up a concern that I've had. So my kids went to the elementary here for 4 years, great experience. Within 2 years ago, we had the opportunity to send him to a private school. And there were a lot of factors that went into that decision, but I would say like one of the biggest ones was looking ahead to the middle school. And we have a lot of like friends, family members who have kids, and obviously former students of mine who are there. And things that I've seen myself, just a lot of negativity, and like, it feels like the behaviors kind of, like a lot of like swearing, even like when I take my elementary kids down to the buses, I'm seeing body parts that I don't want to see, like hearing things. It just feels like the behaviors are kind of getting out of control. And then on top of that, it feels like there's not a lot of positive supports. It feels like a lot of reactive, is how we respond, like reactively, like there's a lot of referrals, suspensions, like even in the first few weeks of school, I've heard of so many of my former students who have been written up or been sent home or spent hours in the office. And it just doesn't feel like the best way to create a successful environment. I've even had some former students who are like great kids, but they just have been instructed, like, put your head down, get through it. And it just makes me like sad. Like, I really care about these kids. I have relationships with a lot of them, and I just feel like we could do more to create positive relationships between staff and student, peer to peer. And just, you know, there's got to be some better systems beyond just writing referrals, sending kids home, sending kids to the office, which is what I hear is happening. And I don't know if it's just like in unstructured times, like maybe we could look at some data, like, is it all happening in one class or between classes or at pickup or at lunch, you know, like, let's start looking at it and finding some solutions. And maybe that is happening. We just aren't seeing the fruit of those solutions yet. But you know, I even like recently had an 8th grader who I had a few years ago, and she was like, I just want to go back to the elementary. Like, I don't like the atmosphere here. And it's just making me sad. Like, those kids shouldn't feel like that. And I feel like we just need to find some better ways to help kids be successful, find ways to prevent the behaviors before they're happening, so we're not just constantly reacting to them. And so just, you know, hearing it from lots of different parents, and even students themselves, like, it just feels like maybe we need to focus on that. Like, I would love to see, like, is our referral rate comparative to other middle school rates? Like, is that what every middle school does? And maybe that's just like what we do as middle school to respond to behavior. Like, is the behavior changing because we're writing these referrals and sending kids home all the time? You know, just like, how is that helping? Is it making a successful environment for these kids? And not all kids can just power through, you know, and put their heads down and stay out of trouble. Like, I have a busy child, so I know that he would not succeed there. And that was a big reason in why we were like, we can't do this. So, you know, just looking at like, what do we have in place? Like, how are we creating positive relationships between staff and kids? And what are we doing to help prevent these behaviors instead of just always reacting to them? So I don't know if that's something that could be like presented at a future board, like our referral rate, our suspension rate, and how that compares to other districts, and how that's helping change the behavior, or like what we're doing, like positive behavior support wise, to help change the environment so that kids are feeling more successful.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. I know that as a board, the board meetings we've had this school year, a lot of it's revolved around trying to figure out ways we can monitor how our middle school students are doing. I personally have expressed concerns that there doesn't seem to be much to motivate students when it comes to either academic success or you know, behaviors, just based on feedback from my own kids in the middle school. I now have 2 currently in there. And we've talked about looking at attendance rates and doing the dibbles in middle school, not just elementary. But I think potentially depending on identifying information, getting information on like what referral rates look like or suspensions would be helpful on a quarterly basis as well, because like I said, it's something that I've brought up at prior meetings. Because we just don't seem to have much to motivate, and all three of my kids have told me that the students know that the grades they get don't matter, so if they're not getting the motivation from home, then there may be some of those students that just like, I don't have to worry about it until ninth grade, and there doesn't seem to be much other motivation for behavior management either, in terms of following rules. And also we had, at the last meeting, we had a student from the high school who reported that there just doesn't seem to be much school spirit. So apparently there's sentiment in the high school as well among the students when it comes to that kind of thing. So I do feel, I don't necessarily know, but I do feel it is a priority for the admin team, relatively brand new admin team. And I think something that they're struggling with is that there wasn't a lot of consistent fundamental systems in place when they took over, that was making it kind of hard to do more higher level stuff. So they've been having to kind of start from scratch to develop those and get buy-in from everybody, just to be able to get snapshots of what kids' attendance look like at any given day, or what their attendances look like. So you're not the only one who's noticed. But I also would encourage you to follow up with Jim if you haven't already.
But go back to the principals, so encourage folks.
Sorry.
Yeah, encourage folks that are coming to talk to you, to go talk to them.
Oh, yeah, I do. I tell everyone, you gotta say something.
Can I speak to that just for a second? In terms of,
Again, thank you very much. 5.0 action items, 5.1 approved consent agenda. So per Jim's email, we can approve the entire list all at once, or we can go item by item depending on what folks are feeling.
So it should consent agenda, we would approve it, and we would actually remove them back into changes or additions. So since none of those were removed, they changed their addition, we either approve the consent agenda or we don't.
That's good.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda, all items 5.1.1 through 5.7.
I just want to for
Sorry.
just by the
Oh, I'm sorry, 5.1. Yes.
I second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. 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 Here's unanimously. All right, so 5.2, accept 22-23 division 22 assurances.
And these ones we do have to do separately.
I'll move to accept 2023 to 22 assurances.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. 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 Unanimous. And we're just accepting these as first read.
These would all be first reads, and they are, you notice in your packet. Basically, the cover page there will have, whether it's an update, or if it's But for instance, with the policy on around wellness, there's the rescinding of the AR that goes with that. I think most of them are updates. It goes in, you see in parentheses as far as whether there's an update on it.
So since the first read, will they be coming back? That's the part I'm still trying to clarify.
Yeah, so the board policy review or even acceptance just requires 2 reads. So it's be the
I got it.
Yeah.
I had in my head that we would have those like. In a separate section to read, do the first reading, and then the next board meeting, we would do the approval. So I was just clarifying, maybe I misremembered.
Right, so what we've done so far, and I can get some better clarification, is we've gone ahead and made it an action item even as a first read and just approving it as a first read.
Okay, and we still have to do 5.3 through 5.7 individually.
Yeah,
All right. Let's start us off. Motions.
And move that we accept the board policy LBE and as first reading.
Sorry.
Well, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.
Move that we accept board policy EFA first reading.
Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Move that we accept board policy GCBDA first reading.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'll move to rescind board policy GCABA.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Yes. All right. 6.0 board discussion, 6.1. Tipping point from feckless reform to substantive instructional improvement. Well, my understanding from your email is that we were going to read this during the board meeting. Oh, so that's what, I'm sorry,
yeah, we talked about starting to add some
right,
school reform type of information within it for people to read and kind of develop a collective understanding of school reform languages, what's out there as far as the research, but to really present that and then have an opportunity for basically just collective comment. I didn't like, I can, understand this, but I have more questions about, and I can bring back additional articles specific to topics that you might have as well for the board. But the big idea is to get a collective understanding without having to build in more work sessions.
so I got this at this point, we'll open up the floor to any thoughts, questions.
Okay, we'll read it. I don't know if you guys will like what I have to say, but I'll be brutally honest. Was everyone able to read it or not yet? I can give a quick story. I mean, it went, so at my day job, we also have a board who's over our company, similar in how the school board is over the school district. They talked a lot about how a lot of big, high planning sessions and mission vision statements and setting big goals, audacious goals and all sorts of stuff isn't super effective in the long term, it seemed like, which I concur, just thinking about how our board works and how stuff actually gets done at the company and that kind of thing. And it leaned more on teachers being the primary turning point, I guess, or key to having schools improve and their techniques and practices and stuff. And I fully agree with that. Honestly, to talk about our session we had 2 weeks ago or whatever, the first 3/4 of that, we're talking about how important and influential the board is in all sorts of different areas of the school, which I have a hard time buying off of. It seemed like a big session of how important and how much influence we have in all these different areas. And we're most important in hiring the one hire that we do hire, Jim, and then making sure that he's setting the rest of the district and school in the direction that we agree with. And he's hiring staff, and that staff is hiring more staff. That's good. And teachers are the most important thing in the school. And I think it's just our job to make sure the school's heading in the right direction. When we have community members and parents point things out like that, then we make sure that our superintendent and our principals and assistant principals and whoever else are taking that information in and implementing things. I'm not a teacher, I'm not an administrator. I have a day job and a family and all sorts of other stuff that takes up all my time. I'm not the right person to be figuring out this stuff. My job is just an oversight as a board. And I thought this is a good article that kind of hammers that home. One other thing is just talking about too many goals, which I know I mentioned a couple of times with our goals that we set a few times ago. There's a lot on there. I mentioned that a couple of times, but it is your first real year here. So having a lot of goals is not necessarily a bad thing, as long as it doesn't stay too many and starts to whittle down over time and really focus in. So those are my thoughts.
I read it, it absolutely resonated with me in much the same way, for the same reasons. Not so much the experience I have here, but elsewhere. What I didn't know how to, I didn't know quite what to do with is there is obviously a long list of things the district has to do because the state says so. And there seems to be little to no flexibility there, and I may be wrong about that, but that's certainly my impression. And a whole lot of what we've done is to make sure we've met those requirements. In fact, well, what we just approved was all the assurances that we've done all these things the right way and the right time and right people, so that we don't get our hands slapped or worse. But I mean, I understand that's how it works. Where I struggled, again, it very much resonated with me. What I struggled with was, I don't remember the language they used, the reform. Get my religious language mixed up with my education. They're going to say the reformed position, but that wouldn't quite apply here. All the stuff that this guy was arguing was a mistake. Is all the stuff that we've just been doing typical of what he's saying is pretty much useless? Are those the things that would his criticisms be captured in those things that we've been busy doing?
I would say yes, to some extent, when you think about large scale strategic planning, and what coming to an understanding of what does that mean? Is it a top down as far as that goes? I think this kind of reinforces a little bit of what we've done so far. We've done collective bargaining, we've changed some of the language, we discussed early release, we discussed professional growth setting and how that can influence what we're doing with professional, with the early release, which really gets us back to the teacher level and those teaming activities and having teachers examine their practices, talk with one another, examine data, go back to their classrooms, try things out, did it work, did it not work, come back together, make changes. Is really what he's getting back here to is to make sure that those planning as far as moving the dial for student achievement is done at the level where it should be, which is at the teacher level. From our level, then is, I think what we discussed a little bit last time as well, where the influence of the board comes in, is what does our school district data look like? Is our the money that we're investing in certain areas, is it having a meaningful impact like we think it should? Does it just directly relate to the strategies that are getting impact activities? And student achievement, getting students to school on time and school safety.
So from your perspective, did you get done reading this and say, that's exactly what we're doing, what he says we're supposed to be doing? Or did you think to yourself, whoa, we're making all sorts of mistakes here, we need to make some fundamental changes?
Now, I made Mike Smoker fan, who's the art of this, and some of the people that he did in here, and so I completely agree with and align with the information.
Yeah. Well, that's what I assumed, right? They give it. I think the problem, well, I can only speak for myself, the problem that I have is it's hard to know. The teaching teams, which I realized that we talked about there in the last couple of pages, which makes total sense to me. I don't have a good enough sense about what actually happens at the teacher level. I don't know if we're doing that or not.
Right.
So that was what was hard, was to try to bring together, what are we doing? What are we not doing? Because as I read this, I thought, yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
So our elementary has been involved with the deform model that they mentioned in here for some time.
Yeah.
And putting those things into play, the practices that they have, our middle school and high school, this is new for them this year, and it's really kind of step one. Getting them together in content area teams to discuss their professional growth, building those teams regularly towards a single goal for a content area and there's so many other topics in here. When you think about like in year two, what this might look for a secondary level in particular, grading practices. You might have teams that will take on grading practices, equitable grading practices, standards-based grading practices versus the old A, B, C, E, and F grading practices. Homework. Homework has been, I've discussed homework at the secondary level for 25 years now. Do you give homework? Is it effective? Is it not effective?
Those for me. It's a long time.
And for some kids, it really is. For others in today's day and age, where there's so many other distractions or activities and is it coming back? Is it coming back down? Is it spending more times the next day going over and teaching what they've already taught, and could they have done that, spent that time better actually influencing what students were learning versus maybe undue learning. Yeah. But that is the concept of that.
I guess the lens I read it through was this seems more directed at admin, at like superintendents than it did the board. And so kind of just the way I took it is like, this is like where you're getting some of the priorities that you're focusing on with the, like you've already mentioned. So, I mean, so when I'm reading it, I was like, okay, so this seems like it's addressed, it's a letter to superintendents and potentially their admin teams, not necessarily the board.
The lens for it, I think, though, is there a common, do we have a common understanding of what we're doing? So we can come and say, listen, we're through collective bargaining, we've changed some language, we're working on growth and goal development at the building level, we're identifying our early release time through our calendar that you guys approve, and you put money towards doing that's an investment to be able to do this teaming work. Beyond that, what does teaming mean, right? So I think as far as us collectively knowing the direction that we're going, does this work as far as the planning and use of that teaming time is a positive direction to be able to go in? And so then I think when the board is working on direction, and we're going through what we're doing right now with the work sessions in OSBA, there's opportunity there during the year when you're presented with either ideas or public feedback or comment, being able to maintain focus, I think, as well, and collectively know what that focus looks like.
That's something that was talked about over and over again at the summer board conference. There needs to be a direction so that we are all on the same page and going for the same thing. But that the 75% of your board meeting should be talking about kids and student achievement and behaviors, and like the survey that went out, the middle school and high school. Are the kids engaged? Is there, like, do they have positive relationships at school? That once that, we have a mission statement, it's fine. But like, okay, if that's what, and Jen set super goals. Then now it's time to move forward off of that and talk more boots on the ground. How the house and for him, the house, and for us. Monitoring. All of that. Unless I'm making our mission statement sound pretty, but.
Just want to, nothing else for the record and anybody watching online, just in case they're curious what we're referring to. It's again, the tipping point from feckless reform to substantive instructional improvement. By Mike Schmoker. Just an article. I like the idea of doing this on a regular basis. I don't know how I got through your email that we were gonna not necessarily read the whole thing, but parts of it, I apologize.
No, and this is a fair, I would hope this would be about as long as one that I would send out. I would imagine the next one, there's another research event, last name of Hattie, that talks about effect size of different things that you might do during a day or focus on, and whether that effect size actually relates in like years worth of student achievement. So the idea is if it doesn't have a certain effect size, you should be focusing on it.
All right, any further discussion? 7.0 reports and information, 7.1 quarterly financial report.
All right, I have in your packet the quarterly document. So it starts out with the monthly revenues and expenditures. So all of these documents are prior to audit. We will have some changes to these once our audit is completed. The in-person portion took place on October 3rd. They expressed their expectation that there will be no negative findings. So that's really good news, but they're finishing up. And it has to be done by December 31st. We're hoping, since they came early, that maybe it'll be done early and we can get good financial statements with all the correct adjustments already in them. This monthly report is just a high-level transparency document, summarizes the general fund. One thing to notice, there's no taxes in the revenues, because any taxes that come in through September 30th are actually journaled back into last year because they're off of last year's tax levy. Anything that comes in from October 1st go into this year. So there's nothing there, but it will be fine. Assuming the way it went last year, we actually over collected a little more than we thought we would. The other thing that's a little different about these quarterly is that since we don't have full staff in July and August, our expenses fall behind. And our revenues are actually more ahead because we get a double payment. If you look in July, we got 1.4 million off the state school fund, and then we will get 700,000 a month for the next 9 months. There's no July payment for that. They want to start you out with enough cash to get everything going that you need to in your district. There is any questions on this first sheet? If not, the next page is the general fund quarterly actuals. It's basically a restatement of the first, it's a reduced statement of these monthly statement. There's no prediction, so we don't have our year-to-date projections yet because it is first quarter. Next quarter, you will have a little more experience under our belt, and we'll have better projections as to where we are compared to budget. There's no questions on that. The cash and investments report. It shows the ending balances of all of our cash accounts as of September 30th. Our local government investment pool interest rates increased to 4.63, and it actually moved to 5% today. Our local bank has been matching LGIP rates, beating them in some instances, so I do have a message into them to see where their rates are, and if they are under what the LGIP pool gives us, I will keep more money in the LGIP. So I kind of can move those investments over into the money market if it's a better rate, which as of the end of this quarter, it was a better rate by a few points. But since we just got another jump in LGIP, I don't know what October looks like for Banner. And change we made in response to fraudulent activity targeting school districts. We've recently enrolled in a bank program called Positive Pay. So basically we upload all our payments into the system. And so every time there's a draw made on our account, they have a document to confirm it. So if there's a change of amount or a change of who a check is issued to, they hold it and they send us a note. And so every day I go in and look to see if there's anything that needs to be pushed through or held back. So it's a little teeny bit more work, but it has been helping the schools. So there's a lot of fraud happening and a lot of schools have lost a lot of money through that. It seems to be a really, must be a successful target, both through fraud and through ransomware. So we're trying to be super diligent on both of those fronts. Any questions on the cash investments? All right. The last sheet is a report of our reserves in our special revenue funds. It shows the September 30 balances. These are a transfer. I mean, these are the funds that we set up with transfers in our budget. Those transfers were made last week. So the money's gone from general fund into these special funds to be used for our projects. And so you will see it on the next quarterly that those account balances will change. And then the last two on this page is just our accounting of our preschool program and our food service fund at this point in time. And that's all I have unless you have questions.
Those transfers of money that got spent or expected to spend.
The transfers is what we budget to build these funds up with like building projects,
Yeah.
maintenance projects, equipment. So we put it in as we get a few months into the year. We want to make sure we have plenty of money in the general fund. And then we move it over and then we will spend off that for the year. And then whatever we don't spend rolls to the next year.
Right. 7.2 quarterly enrollment report.
We've discussed enrollment quite a bit now through work sessions and last meeting, but you can see in the far right hand column is the 23-24 quarter one enrollment, which ended September 30th. Pretty good about the numbers there as far as those are actual numbers of kids that are in seat for a total of 992 students. We recently began, we've got, you can see the numbers for middle school grade 6, 7, and 8 is 74, 69, 66. So we've got some big classes that are leaving the high school, some smaller classes that are coming in. And so we've come back just this last week and looked at the transfers and started to open that up to see if some students are still on with them as well. So we make sure that we keep our in line with our budget.
We have the same report for Q4. Who could send us? Just where last year ended and in the previous years. Thanks.
All right, then 7.3 special education report. Evening, Whitney.
Good evening. So some things I want to highlight, some things that we have kind of implemented, action items I'd say that we've accomplished. We kind of been reflecting some, this was some work that started last year. have loved the addition of some extra licensed staff, but it sort of became abundantly clear all of a sudden, we had created a structure where kids had a teacher, a special ed teacher. Like for K3, and it's somewhat different for 4-5, and it's somewhat different for like 6-7-8, and then somewhat different. And it was a lot of turnover from teacher to teacher, and a staff member that's supposed to be a lot more of a consistent advocate for kids. So law of unintended consequences, right, is like love the extra staff, but weren't really loving how that was playing out. So we tried something at the elementary school last year, loved it, rolled it up to the middle school, high school this year, where we still have all the same number of licensed staff, but we've divided duties differently. So we have staff that focus on teaching and staff that focus on case management. And so we have, like at the elementary school, we have one K5 teacher, and then we have a teacher for the CLC program, and then we have one staff that does all of that case management. And so that relieves a little bit of the burden from the people that are teaching to be able to focus more on the instruction. And also has helped us to streamline our paperwork and compliance pieces, so that we can make sure that we are writing high quality IEPs, that we are reporting on things in the way that we should be, not that we weren't, but just, continuing to streamline those efforts. And so then up at the middle school, that looks like having somebody that teaches 6-9, the first half of 9th grade, to cover that high school transition, and then they transition partway through 9th grade to the high school teacher, who then sees them through 12th grade. And so that, I think, I'm hoping will help us to better, will free up, I think, some bandwidth where our elementary case manager can really help more clearly transition our incoming pre-K kids to kindergarten, like a really available set of eyes to really make sure that those kids come in with the support they need. And then again, someone to really monitor that 5th to 6th transition, and then some really thoughtful handoff at that 9th grade level, so that we're kind of monitoring those handoff points a little bit better, and creating a little bit more consistency for kids and for the system. And so that's been working really well. And I think it's just giving us better support and better serving kids and better supporting gen ed teachers. Some kinks to work out, obviously, but I think it's working on the whole really well. We've been working with the elementary school staff as they continue to build out, and build out academic and behavior support systems with some new things in place. Deborah put some new things in place last year around kind of academic SST processes and rolling out some behavior things. So just continuing to partner with that. I think we're doing some good things for kids there. We are trying to do kind of some system-wide SEL work within the special ed department, kind of reinforcing what the elementary school is doing with second steps and the counseling work, with a different program, kind of reinforcing that, especially for our kiddos that need a little extra social skills support. And then similarly, kind of leveraging what the middle school and high school is doing with Character Strong, and trying to kind of, again, reinforce that for our students, that those are real areas of struggle for. We are in a pretty good place with some of the assessment and progress monitoring pieces that we have in place for reading and math at the elementary level. And then you'll see items we're working on, really want to continue to build that up for what does that look like at the middle school, high school level. What data are we collecting, besides just grade data, which although that is important, I think there's also space to think about how are we leveraging the DIBELS data, some of those tools that we're starting to put in place, and using those a little bit better. Transitions continues to be a big area of focus for the Department of Ed in terms of monitoring what school districts are doing in terms of supporting obviously all kids, but especially students in special education in developing their career readiness, right? Exploring career options, developing career-related learning skills, making plans for post-secondary. And so just continuing to build out how we do that better, and how we continue to refine those processes. We're using we're leaning on our career counselor and YP specialist at the high school to do some of that work. Helping run that program, but then also thinking about how are we supplementing that, how are we really making sure that our kids that are most impacted have, you know, the best foot up as we approach graduation. There is a newly minted program coming out of the University of Oregon, the Ballmer Institute on, I think it's on children behavioral health, a whole new program around behavioral health and creating specialists in the field of you know, child and adolescent behavioral health. They're running a new program called the Micro Credential Program, which is essentially a 12 credit, one course per term kind of micro program to help teachers kind of, or staff better define, better refine, better build kind of behavioral analysis skills. And so we have 2 staff, one in each building, that are working through that program this year, with the goal being that as we come to the end of the year, one of my priorities would be to start to figure out how then, what do we do with that expertise, right? You know, we have some staff that are getting some better expertise over the course of this year. How can we start to leverage them as experts next year in helping our general education teachers and staff understand behavior, respond to behavior, you know, think about how do we you know, address students that have challenging behaviors, and just kind of helping to, you know, promote some sort of that peer-to-peer consultation support for teachers. We have a new data piece coming on board this year, the Oregon Data Suite, which we're particularly excited about in special education as a way to maybe streamline the monitoring of that data and thinking about how are we what data are we looking at, how are we monitoring it, and I think hopefully maybe we'll use that as a way to be a little more efficient in that, so that we can be a little more responsive in that. And then another big piece in the special education world this year is Senate Bill 819, which someone spoke to earlier at an earlier board meeting around abbreviated days, and essentially the primary goal of the legislation being trying to reduce the practice of saying, you know, the student is really challenging, or they have big needs, or we have really limited staff for whatever reason. We can't have you on site the whole day, which is a practice I understand where that comes from, but the perversive, of course, being that kids are in fact entitled to a full day of education, right? And they're never going to make progress if they're not here for a full day. There's good, there's bad, there's unintended consequences, as there is with all legislation, right? So we're kind of working through all of that, but really thinking just about what systems do we have in place for monitoring that, addressing any reporting needs we have related to it. It's a relatively non-issue for our school district, thankfully. It's not like we had a slew of kids on shortened days last year that we had to scramble for this year, which is great. But continuing to think, as we maybe have the 1 or 2 kids that occasionally pop up, that it's like, maybe once upon a time I would have thought abbreviated day, is that really the right thing anymore? Or, you know, is there something that we think differently about how we're supporting kids? And then kind of our one big priority before the end of the year, I would like to continue to think about how we can recruit some of our specialists. We're currently contracting with an online agency to provide school psychology services, and also contracting with a different online provider to do our speech language pathology services, which are fine. They're working out great, actually better in some ways than I might have ever thought they would. So I'm happy with the providers, but would obviously love to have those as on-site in-person people instead. So just try to see if there's any way, we've talked about some interesting ideas. Could we host you know, a college, get an intern? How can we partner with the universities better? Just what could we do to continue to try to draw people in? There are industries that seem to be going largely online. A lot of providers like working remote, and like working from home. I guess we fault people for that. But it has made recruiting for those 2 positions difficult. And so just wanting to continue to see if there's any bright ideas we have over the course of the year of how we can bring those back on site and stuff like that.
And those just remain open, right? Or is that something that doesn't open up until end of the school year, beginning of next school year?
At this point, because we've signed contracts for
Oh,
use, we would wait.
gotcha.
Yeah, as far as hiring, on to the next place,
We held the fight open for a long time.
We strung that speech one along as long as we could.
Had one advocate for a school site that we reviewed, and I think that individual had at least 3 other offers at the same time as well. We've actually met, the school site coordinator at the University of Oregon. School sites have to have, somebody with a doctorate degree overseeing their practicum work, so we'd have to find a way. As far as how we can do that remotely, or somebody who's got the license, if we were to get an intern. Or a lot of our bigger partner districts. Majority of their sites, majority of their school sites that do the work at the building level, so like in Springfield, they'll share a school site, say between 2 different buildings, or 3 different buildings. Generally, they're all interns.
Yeah,
So, I don't know how successful we'll be, but obviously it is a continued priority for us. If we can find a way to bridge that gap, so.
and then, in regards to abbreviated days, I was just curious if. Facilities is it all a barrier? I know you said it's not really much of a problem, but I was just curious how much of a role, if at all, in our district facilities space. Plays a role in, like, maybe it's not an issue in terms of the abbreviated days right now, but it potentially could pose a barrier to that in the future. I'm just curious where we're at.
I think that's a really good question. I don't think at the moment it's anything that I would say is a necessary barrier. Things like getting kids scheduled for the full schedules. That's been a little bit of a challenge this year, trying to think about like our high school kids and making sure that they have the courses they need on a full schedule. It's been a traditional practice that seniors often don't need full schedules, and so trying to think about, well, but if you want a full schedule, how do you access that, because there's only so many wood shop classes, the metal shop is only so big, and there's some of those just real and present, they are what they are, the limitations, right, but I know as we continue to think at the high school level about how we build the CTE programs and, expand some of those offerings. I wouldn't say it's a concern of mine that we're in any kind of a risky place in terms of staffing our facilities where those would become the barriers.
Thank you very much. 8.0 board communication, 8.1 committee or community news announcements. Anything in there we need to discuss, Jim? Okay. 9.0 other business.
I have a question for, or have you had time to talk with your staff about brainstorming any ways to collect some reading and math data as far as just progress from beginning of quarter to end of quarter?
I think really where we're at right now, and Jim kind of spoke to this in terms of the development of the teaming, it can be a little bit difficult because really what we need them to start doing is just that, getting together in departments to be able to have some of those conversations with the understanding that the long play, which really we bump up next year, is actually developing those PLCs. So a structure in which we're really being able to talk in teams about appropriate assessments, because there's a ton of ways to do this wrong. So really spending the time to slowly turn the ship and get them to the point and get them resourced in front of them so that we can have those productive conversations as departments as it pertains to grading, as it pertains to assessments, common assessments. There's a lot to be said for bringing the staff together around targeted goals and standards and making sure that we're all in alignment, but also that we are really working with one another to ensure that we have assessments that are actually measuring what we're trying to measure here. I mean, I think that Oftentimes we live in silos, so bringing those teams together. So we can't, it shouldn't be one individual going through an assessment and saying, yep, that's got exactly what I'm going for. It has to be a larger conversation. As a department, so as Jim spoke to before, really getting them around a common goal, getting them around each other and having that time built into the teacher directed days and kind of reporting out and. Talking about tracking those goals is a pretty big step right now.
Any other business? 10.0 next meeting. Our next board meeting is November 6th, right here, 7 PM. Unless there's anything else, 11.0 adjournment, we are adjourned.